Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by Speedstream. I'm Jim Cardle. With the legislative session just finished and the state budget completed, Senate Finance Chairman Tommy Williams says that the budget was such a good product that he didn't know one House or Senate member that could vote against it, and it turned out he was just spot on. We're pleased to be able to visit with Senator Tommy Williams from House District 4 today, Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee.
How are you doing, Jim?
Real good, Tommy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming in. As I mentioned, as always, the budget, only thing you all are constitutionally required to do. You are the new chairman of the Senate Finance Committee after running the Transportation Committee for a while, which we'll get into. But first, if I can, just give us a general outlook of what you think the session accomplished. There's still some discussion as to how successful it was or wasn't, if y'all could have done more. But generally, I think folks perceive it as being a successful session, correct?
I think it was a successful session, particularly from a conservative standpoint. We kept spending under control while we addressed the state's priorities, and we were able to accomplish some important conservative goals. For instance, on Senate Bill 21, we've added drug testing as a requirement for receiving unemployment benefits. This is something that had been advocated for a long time. And so I think when you look at it as a whole, we accomplished a tremendous amount this session.
And then how about transportation? I want to drill down here in a minute, if I can, into spending first of all, and then taxing second of all. But as part of segueing into the spending issue in the state budget, you were a key player in the transportation efforts. Talk a little bit about transportation and water as well, if you would.
Those two key infrastructure things are things that we've been needing to address for a long time. We passed the state's water plan 16 years ago, but we've never funded it. And so this session, we passed legislation that if the voters approve our constitutional amendment, we'll take a couple of $2 billion out of the rainy day fund and put it in a constitutionally dedicated account that will fund a $53 billion worth of $53 billion worth of water projects over the next 2 or 3 decades. It's very important that we move forward with this. We're coming off the drought of record. We have communities in our state where they're literally trucking water into those communities, and we can't continue to grow unless we have an adequate water supply. Jim, people don't realize there's only one natural lake in the state, Caddo Lake. Half of it's in Louisiana. Okay. And so all of the lakes that we have in our state are man-made lakes, and they were built as water reservoirs. And really, since the 1950s to the 1980s, there hasn't been any significant new capacity added. And as fast as our state's growing, it's essential that we do that. Same thing with transportation, and that's the one area that I feel like we weren't successful. And what I've said for several sessions is we need a robust funding stream that will allow, and it has to be predictable so that the department can go out and plan into the future. Mm-hmm. These are multi-decade projects, many of the transportation projects, and so there needs to be a reliable funding stream so that they know what they're going to have to work with into the future. There's a chance we're going to get to address that during the special session, but it is the one piece of unfinished business from the regular session.
Well, you mentioned certain parts of the budget there. Let me ask you if I can. There's been some discussion as to whether the budget's going up 4%, if it's going up in the teens. You were one of a handful of state legislators out of 151 legislators who were on the conference committee to write the state budget as chairman of Senate Finance. Talk, if you would, a little bit. Is it going up? Population inflation? Is it a conservative budget? What are your thoughts?
It is a conservative budget, and we've left roughly $500 million in the bank. So this idea that's out there that we've spent every dime we can get our hands on is simply not true. We're $600 or $800 million below our constitutional spending limit. So we haven't even approached what is allowed by the spending limit in our under the Constitution. And when you look at it on an all funds basis, this budget is growing by maybe 2% a year, which is well below population and inflation. And I'd say anything in a state growing as fast as ours, anything below 10% is below population plus inflation. But there's a bigger story that needs to be told, Jim, and that story is what we've accomplished since the Republicans took control of the legislature in the 2003 election cycle. That was that first session after the 2002 election cycle. And that's when we got a working majority in both chambers. And that was my first session on Senate Finance. And since that time, if you adjust the budget for population and inflation, and you take out the tax savings that we had in the 05 session, the budget has gone down by 1% once you adjust for those things.
On the longer term.
That's over 12 years.
Yeah.
And so we've really bent the curve for the growth of state spending. Now, having said that, there are people that say, well, you shouldn't, you need to count the money that you're putting out of the rainy day fund for water in there. And what I would say is, I don't see why that should count against our spending cap, because what we've done is we've created a fund that's going to finance these projects, and that fund, the money will be paid back as the water is sold, and it'll be a perpetual fund to help fund this infrastructure into the future. So, I think some of the critics, they're engaging in a little fuzzy math, and I'm disappointed to say I think they're doing it for their own reasons. It serves their fundraising needs. They need a good devil, and I guess they want me to be that person. And so, that's the way it goes sometimes.
And you're right. It's one thing to spend money on health care or some of these education, the base budgetary needs, but it sounds like what you're talking about is setting up a revenue stream, not only for expenditures, but generating revenue in the future. Folks, I want to remind you we're visiting with Senate Finance Chairman Tommy Williams, who was elected senator in 2002. Tommy, you were a House member for 3 terms before, and you're the only CPA currently in the Senate. Let's talk about taxes a little bit. Part of that growth, we were talking prior to sitting down here about how there's 1,700, 2,000 people moving to Texas a day. We've got to manage the growth, but part of the incentive to come here is our tax code. You all made some changes, set up some things to continue the growth. Talk, if you would, about the tax code.
Well, there's 2 or 3 things that I think are important. First of all, there's about $1.3 billion of total tax relief that's contemplated in this whole budget. $300 million of that is actually fee relief, but the other $1 billion is pure tax relief. And that is making the small business tax credit for franchise taxes permanent, and then a rate cut across the board. We added some in for research and development, and some other things for trying to get data centers to relocate in our state. So, when you look at the whole package, it's very good. We're already considered a state that is business friendly and a low tax environment. And so to think that we're one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing state in the country, we're managing our budget so that it's growing less than the state is growing, and we're cutting taxes at the same time. I think we're really the model that Republicans want to emulate all over the country. And part of what gets lost is, for instance, if you compare us to Louisiana, a great state to be from, a lot of those folks have moved over here to Texas, but they have a state income tax, and we don't have that. So I applaud Governor Jindal for what he's trying to do to get their finances more like they are here in Texas. But you have to keep in mind that we've been singing off this song for over a decade, and really we're the gold standard for economic development and a pro-business environment.
And that comes from just an old country boy from Marshall, Texas.
That's right.
Where you were born and raised, I should have mentioned. One final question. I'd be remiss if we wrapped up, and you've been in the news a little bit lately, although you're in a special session. Comptroller Combs announced the other day that she has decided not to run for re-election. You're chairman of the Finance Committee. You're well known. You're from the city of Houston. Your name's on a lot of people's discussion points. Any thoughts there?
Well, we're interested and we're taking a look at it. And as I said in my announcement, we're not going to make a decision until the special session's over. I'm focused on the redistricting effort, and I'm focused on trying to solve our transportation problems during the special session. I'm the only CPA in the Senate. I've got over a decade of experience on the Finance Committee, and I've had 4 sessions that I've been on the Conference Committee for the budget. So I think I'm well qualified for the job. I also have enjoyed serving my district and serving as the Senate Finance Chair. And so we've just got to weigh all those things, and I don't think it's really appropriate for me to do that until the special session's over.
Well, we'll have you back. You mentioned one special session. We'll see what happens with transportation, possibly. Hope you'll come back if that's the case.
Oh, I'd love to. I hope we get that problem solved, and I think there's a chance we will.
Good. Appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Folks, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV with Senate Finance Committee Chairman Tommy Williams from SD4 out of Houston. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.